Everyone's seen that classic apocalypse story where a mysterious virus sweeps across humanity and the survivors have to fight just to avoid becoming food. It's the kind of survival narrative that turned titles like The Walking Dead and The Last of Us into massive hits. We just can't get enough of watching humanity push to its moral limits. But what if, instead of rotting zombies, the end of the world were ruled by gothic vampires, demon-possessed weapons, and an army of deeply traumatized teenagers? That's where we land in the madness that is Seraph of the End. The anime is basically a post-apocalyptic military camp, except humanity constantly proves it can be far worse than the monsters. The series delivers over-the-top battles, protagonists who ignore all common sense, and a level of emotional dependency that hooks you right away. At its core, beneath all the blood-soaked chaos, the story asks a very clear question: how far would you go to save the ones you love? So today on the channel, Seraph of the End, a chaotic apocalypse where the entire cast desperately needed therapy. Humanity collectively decides that adulthood is overrated, and everyone over 13 resolves to lie down and die from some boutique flu, turning society into a giant parking lot of corpses and crashing planes. While the world becomes an all-you-can-eat buffet for bacteria, the goth lowly vampire Cruel Tepe strolls through the rubble of Tokyo like she's on an apocalyptic catwalk, ready to turn the surviving kids into walking juice boxes. 4 years later, in the underground city of Sanguinem, we meet our protagonist Yuichiro, an edgy brat who refuses to accept his status as premium livestock. He's standing in the blood bank line with his best friend Mikaela, the blondie who clearly carries the brain cells for the duo. While Yu complains that the blood juice tastes like trash juice leachate, Mika tries to keep the peace, having learned that being submissive earns you certain perks in the prison cafeteria. But peace is short-lived when two hooded vampires decide to play soccer with orphan children. Yu tries to pull a shonen hero move and attacks the guards, but since he has the physical strength of a wet noodle, he ends up dangling off the walkway. Salvation arrives in the form of Farid, a noble vampire who gives off a strange vibe. He decides to invite Mika to his mansion, and the blonde accepts the invitation with a smile.
Ignore him. You see, he's just a harmless moron.
Why don't you come by my mansion again tonight?
I would like that.
Later, in the dormitory, Mika shows up with curry ingredients, a stolen map, and a weapon he likely grabbed while the vampire was distracted. We have a Last Supper moment where the kids eat happily, unaware they are extras in a tragedy flick. While Yu continues to cosplay as an emo in the corner, the group begins their grand escape through the sewers, dreaming of freedom until they reach the exit where Farid is waiting, applauding the performance. The vampire reveals he let them escape just to crush their hopes. The nightmare begins, and Farid holds nothing back in his attack. In a final act of desperation, Mika steps in front, giving Yu a chance to escape. The protagonist, crying harder than a K-pop fan on military enlistment day, shots Farid in the head and runs into the white, frozen surface world. Out there, he is found by Gurren, a military man who decides to adopt this traumatized new bioweapon. Yu hugs the stranger with excessive force, and we time skip another 4 years to see he is now a 16-year-old soldier, ready to avenge his dead family and probably cause more problems than he solves. Our traumatized hero, Yuichiro, starts the day reminiscing about how his family was slaughtered. Cut to 4 years later, where Yu decides that military orders are merely optional suggestions and lunges at a horseman of the apocalypse, killing the ugly beast just to prove he has the biggest ego in the squad. The reward for saving the day via insubordination? The worst torture known to man. Japanese high school. Gurren, his abusive foster dad and military leader, suspends Yu and says he can only go back to killing vampires if he manages to make a single friend. A nearly impossible task for someone whose entire personality is based on screaming and scowling. At school, Yu is monitored by Shinoa Hiragi, a sarcastic short stack who spends her time poking his back and reminding him that he's a social failure. We then meet Yoichi, a boy with a physical constitution of a marshmallow, getting bullied by a background extra who thinks he actually matters to the plot. Yoichi is trying to buy the bully's friendship with snacks, proving he has the self-esteem of a doormat. Yu tries to ignore it but ends up intervening, probably because the script forced him not to be a complete jerk for 5 minutes. But school mediocrity is interrupted when the alarm blares. A vampire has escaped the lab and is thirsty. While anyone with a brain runs away, Yu runs toward the danger because his intelligence is inversely proportional to his will to live. Shinoa calls him an idiot, which is the most accurate analysis of the series so far. Yu finds the anorexic vampire trying to turn a student into a human juice box.
Since I've seen a vamp, I'm gonna kill you.
The tough guy Yamanaka is pissing his pants in the corner, but Yoichi, in a fit of suicidal courage, throws himself onto the vampire. The protagonist jumps into the fight, but the vampire leaps out the window with him, proving that gravity is merely a theoretical concept to her. They land miraculously alive, but before the vampire can drain Yu to the last drop, Gurren appears and thrusts his big, long, throbbing with cursed energy sword into her heart, stealing all the glory and the kill. Yoichi rolls down the hill like a sack of potatoes and collides with Yu, ending up in a very suspicious and tearful position, declaring how worried he was. Shinoa, with the smile of someone who loves watching a circus fire, points out that technically, that physical contact counted as making a friend. Gurren, defeated by logic and bureaucracy, is forced to accept both idiots into the Moon Demon Company. The episode ends with Yu waking up in the hospital, realizing he is now part of a military harem, and that his days of peace ended before they even began. While 3 extras with the narrative relevance of a potted plant try to breach a room full of protective seals, one of them, the genius Yuji, decides to ignore every warning of imminent danger and opens the door, proving that natural selection took a vacation in this universe. On the school rooftop, Yu receives a love letter from the girl he saved in the previous episode, confirming that near-death trauma is the most potent aphrodisiac. But before he can reject the poor girl, Shinoa spawns from the floor to explain that humanity needs to pump its numbers up. Basically, she tells Yu he has a civic duty to spread his generic protagonist genes and get laid for the sake of the nation. To satisfy his curiosity about how to kill bigger things, Shinoa decides to show off her toy. She summons Shikama Doji, a black, long, curved scythe that gets Yu completely worked up. He begs to handle her tool, but Shinoa refuses and decides to humiliate him in a spar. Later, bullies Yamanaka and Shishido come crawling to Yoichi's feet, begging to become disciples of the boy they used as a doormat until yesterday. Yu points out their hypocrisy and lack of spine, but discovers that idiot Yuji entered the forbidden room and never came out. Even knowing this will lead to a federal disaster and a possible death sentence, the Suicide Squad decides to go in and save the background extra. Upon arrival, they find Yuji holding a possessed axe with the look of someone on some serious expired drugs. Shinoa warns them not to do anything stupid, but Yu interprets that as an invitation and rushes to grab the axe handle with both hands. Immediately, Yu's mind is transported back to Sanguinem, where he finds his dead family having dinner as if nothing happened. The children beg for revenge, but Yu, in a rare moment of intelligence, spots the fraud. He knows the real Mika would never ask for revenge. He'd tell Yu to run and be happy. Yu rejects the demon's emotional manipulation, calling the entity a liar and demanding it stop wearing his family's skin. Back in reality, Yu wakes up in a cold sweat. Shinoa is shocked to see he expelled the demon through sheer screaming and willpower, meaning he's finally ready to handle cursed gear without having his brain melted. She promises to recommend him for Gurren's training, bypassing all military red tape. Meanwhile, in the gothic basement, we discover Farid survived the headshot because cockroaches and fabulous villains are indestructible. He skips through the halls singing until he finds a mysterious soldier. Farid taunts him, saying, "Little Yuchan is alive and being raised by humans." The soldier turns, draws his sword, and puts it to the vampire's throat. It's Mikhaila, now grown up, alive, blonde, and sporting vampire fangs.
My dear Mikhaila.
somewhere in a wasteland that looks like Detroit on a good day, Mikhaila appears sporting his new soft goth vampire look. He saves a random background character from a Horseman of John, proving that vampiric puberty did wonders for his physical stats. The girl, possessing the survival instincts of a room-temperature turnip, immediately offers her blood as thanks. Mika politely declines the free drink and decides to dive into a traumatic flashback, because that's just what protagonists do when they have a spare minute. We head back 4 years to discover that Farid, the vampire with highly questionable fetishes, survived a bullet to the head. Apparently, bad weeds and flamboyant villains just don't die. But his party is cut short when the goth lowly queen arrives to survey the mess. She realizes Farid let the human livestock escape on purpose. When he tries to blackmail her by threatening to tell the progenitor council, Cruel decides to pull rank. She rips his arm off as easily as deboning a chicken wing and uses her stiletto heel to give his trachea a deep tissue massage. With the immortal cockroach sufficiently humbled, Cruel turns to the dying Mika. She asks if he wants eternal life, and when he refuses, she simply won't take no for an answer and turns him into a vampire. Back in the present, Yu continues his quest to be the world's worst student. He runs into Kimizuki, a human beanpole in glasses with the abrasive personality of wet sandpaper. Gurren, the educator of the year, watches them bicker and decides the best teaching method is to beat them both unconscious, proving that military didactics are foolproof. Kimizuki, desperate to obtain a cursed gear weapon to save his sick sister, bugs Gurren for a chance. The lieutenant colonel explains that if Kimizuki touches a demon weapon now, he'll turn into demon snacks faster than Yu eats curry. For the final exam, Gurren has the brilliant idea to handcuff Yu and Kimizuki together, forcing a divorced couple dynamic. Predictably, they fail miserably against training dummies because they refuse to cooperate. Things take a turn when news arrives that Kimizuki's sister is in critical condition. Four Eyes wants to finish the test to rank up, but Yu convinces the idiot to go visit his family, dragging him along since they're still chained together like chain gang prisoners. Kimizuki realizes failing a test is less important than his sister, and the two finally form a bond based on shared trauma. Meanwhile, in Sanguinem, Cruel takes the stage to deliver a fiery speech, declaring war against the Imperial Demon Army. Mika and a regenerated Farid watch from the crowd, ready for the inevitable bloodbath to come. Mikhaila renews his premium subscription to the Yu fan club, swearing to rescue the damsel in distress, even if the damsel is a suicidal moron who hates his species. Across the wall, bureaucracy strikes. In a military meeting as exciting as watching paint dry, Gurren is taking a paid nap right in front of the brass. When woken up, he yawns, asks if the boredom is over, and walks out mid-report, essentially giving a metaphorical middle finger to the Hiragi family, the elite magical trust fund brats who think they run the place. In the hallway, Yu tries to kick Gurren, proving his learning curve is a flat horizontal line. The lieutenant blocks the strike with the disdain of someone swatting a fly and decides the best way to hide this brat from the bosses is to give him a weapon of mass destruction. Logically, he seals the deal with a kick to Yu's head, because military pedagogy treats concussions as a love language. Meanwhile, Farid, who radiates windowless white van energy, tries to strike up a conversation with Mika about saving his precious little angel. Mika ignores the predator and takes a trip down memory lane at his old orphanage, where he ends up terrifying the new kids who look at him like he's the midnight tax collector. Realizing his presence is about as welcome as a root canal, he wallows in depression and leaves. Back at school, we discover Yu's intelligence is inversely proportional to his will to kill. He gets his test back with a big fat 0, having written everything in hiragana like a 5-year-old who just learned how to hold a pencil. Shinawa steals the paper and rubs his illiteracy in his face. Our buff nerd takes the opportunity to humiliate the protagonist by revealing he aced the exam, proving it's possible to have both brains and biceps. The lovers' quarrel between Yu and Kimizuki is interrupted when Gurren storms the room for a practical last man standing test. He stabs his sword into the floor, releasing a demonic aura so foul that most of the extras pass out instantly. To no one's surprise, the main trio and Shinoa stay upright. Even Yoichi withstands the pressure, proving that childhood trauma builds magical resistance. Deep underground, facing the cursed gear, Gurren questions if Yoichi has the stones for this. The boy revisits his sister's death in 4K inside his mind and decides his thirst for revenge is greater than his fear of becoming Demon Chow. With the Suicide Squad formed, they move in to make their pacts with the devil. Yu runs straight for a green sword that looks like a radioactive plastic toy, ready to find out if he'll become a hero or just an empty vessel for a dark entity. The episode opens with a nostalgic look back at Yoichi's traumatic childhood, where he is hiding under the bed as Lacus and Renee break into the house and attack his sister, leaving Yoichi traumatized with a lifelong fetish for dark, cramped spaces. In the present, during the demon aptitude test, Yoichi's demon takes the form of his dead sister to remind him he's a coward who likes watching people die from the front row. Meanwhile, Kimizuki faces his own hallucination, his sick sister calling him a selfish piece of human trash. But Four Eyes knows his will to live is stubborn. He subdues the demon and earns his twin swords, proving a sister complex is a valid power source in this anime.
Shut the hell up! Interesting.
You got a cursed gear too? Of course I did.
Our brain-dead protagonist enters a Windows 95 cloud and finds Ashuramaru wearing a child Mika skin. The demon tries the classic survivor's guilt tactic, showing the corpses of the orphans and telling Yu to stop being a chump and focus on pure revenge. But Yu activates his shonen protagonist trap card and yells that he wants power to protect his new friends, creating a contradiction of greed and love that actually turns the demon on. Ashuramaru warns Yu that he's already 10% monster and that humans are worse than devils, before closing the contract and handing over the Black Demon Blade. When Yu and Kimizuki wake up feeling like badasses, they realize Yoichi failed the test spectacularly. The boy didn't have enough hate in his heart, so the demon took the wheel, turning him into a green-horned monster that looks like it crawled out of a budget RPG.
My appetizers. Then the real feast will begin.
Gurren, always the teacher of the year, orders the friends to execute Yoichi before he starts snacking on the background characters. Yu, ignoring any sense of self-preservation, drops his weapon and runs to hug the killing machine, betting everything on the power of friendship speech. While Kimizuki and Shinoa try not to die, Yu screams for Yoichi to come out from under the metaphorical bed. Inexplicably, it works. Yoichi regains consciousness, cries, and the demon goes back in its box. As a reward for saving his friend, Gurren delivers a brutal kick to Yu's stomach, because military pedagogy is taught through physical assault. With the Suicide Squad finally armed, they are deployed to the front lines, while Mika flies over Japan in business class, ready to turn the family reunion into a bloodbath in Shinjuku. Yu wakes up from another traumatic wet dream where child Mika appears as a passive-aggressive demon demanding child support, proving the protagonist can't even get peace in his subconscious. After brushing his teeth with the aggression of someone trying to bite a brick, he meets Shinoa on the subway. She immediately starts flirting by insulting his height and commenting on her dead sister's massive rack, because nothing says good morning in this post-apocalyptic world like comparing the mammary glands of deceased relatives. At the rendezvous point, they find Mitsuba arguing with Gurren because she wanted to be the squad leader. Shinoa, being the professional troll she is, goads Mitsuba until she pulls out a giant battle axe that is clearly compensating for something. Gurren, tired of babysitting armed teenagers, grabs them both by the neck and tells everyone to shut up before shipping them off to Harajuku, but not before warning them that teamwork is the only thing keeping them from becoming fertilizer. The group arrives in Harajuku and immediately falls for the most obvious trap in anime history. A girl runs out screaming from a monster, and Yu, ignoring logic and survival instincts, disobeys Mitsuba's direct orders and charges the danger like a dog chasing a garbage truck. The monster, controlled by vampires, nearly turns the protagonist into ground beef, forcing the rest of the team to clean up his mess. Kimizuki slashes, Yoichi fires arrows into the thing's ass, and Mitsuba finishes it with her axe, while the vampires watch from afar and decide they aren't paid enough to deal with Yu's suicidal stupidity. Back at base, Mitsuba hits Yu with a slap that rings louder than the soundtrack and starts crying, saying she hates people who rush to their deaths. We learn her trauma involves her previous squad being wiped out because she tried to be a hero, just like him. To resolve the dramatic tension, the girls head to the baths, where Shinoa decides personal space is an overrated concept and invades Mitsuba's stall with zero regard for boundaries. The next day, with the military tension properly ignored, the squad heads to Omotesando to kill vampires and ignore hostages, as Shinoa prefers keeping the team scratch-free over saving human cattle. Yu agrees to behave, but we all know his ability to follow rules is shorter than Shinoa's inseam. The Shinoa squad descends into the depths of Omotesando Station and finds a bunch of humans acting like complacent cattle, basically the definition of Stockholm Syndrome mixed with OnlyFans subscribers who think the model actually likes them. Mitsuba tries to explain that they'd rather be living blood bags than fertilizer outside, but the lesson is cut short when vampires appear. While the blonde tsundere tries to maintain formation and give orders, Yu ignores everything, draws his sword, and turns the first vampire into confetti before it can even call for backup. Mitsuba tries to slap him for insubordination, since physical violence is the only love language she knows, but Yu catches her hand and proceeds to save her ungrateful life by killing another enemy.
Just because you blocked me once.
Kamizuki, feeling his fragile masculinity threatened, insists he's way stronger and has a bigger sword, but nobody cares. The group discovers that the innocent little kid who guided them actually set an ambush with 8 vampires, proving that trusting children in a post-apocalypse is just natural selection at work. Mitsuba has traumatic flashbacks of her old squad becoming BBQ and orders them to leave her behind, trying to be the dramatic martyr of the week. Yu refuses, goes full Vin Diesel about family, and cleaves the vampire in two, saving her skin. After the battle, Mitsuba tries to say thanks, but her tsundere operating system crashes. She blushes furiously and says she hates him, officially confirming her entry into the protagonist's harem.
Wait, you wanna say what?
Later, Kamizuki hotwires a military Hummer, and Yu gets as excited as a 5-year-old getting a Hot Wheel. Kamizuki tries to play driving instructor but blushes at Yu's compliments, keeping the group's homoerotic tension at alarming levels. Yu takes the wheel and immediately drives the vehicle into a pole, proving his driving skills are as non-existent as his survival instincts. Shinoa tries to take over, but realizes her legs can't reach the pedals. When the two idiots laugh at the garden gnome, she pulls out her scythe. The scene cuts to Yu and Kamizuki covered in bruises, agreeing that mocking the boss's height is hazardous to their health. Arriving in Shinjuku, they spot a noble vampire who looks like a Calvin Klein model named Crowley. The squad decides to run the guy over with the Hummer, but Crowley stops the multi-ton military vehicle with one hand, humiliating the entirety of human automotive engineering. He toys with the whole team, dodging attacks like he's swatting flies, until 2 other vampires, Chess and Horn, show up to tell him Daddy Ferret is calling. Crowley decides to spare them because he has better things to do, pats Yu on the back, calls them cute livestock, and leaves. Shinoa is shocked and oddly impressed when Yu suggests retreating instead of committing suicide, and the group advances toward the Shinjuku wall before the city turns to dust. The battle for Shinjuku kicks off with military helicopters being shot down by arrows, solid proof that human technology has regressed to the Middle Ages, but with Wi-Fi. While the human commander barks useless orders, a cargo plane decides to go full kamikaze and slams into the wall. Out of the flaming wreckage step Lacus and Renee, 2 vampires debating the precision of their suicide parking as if they were just shooting the breeze in line at the DMV. Meanwhile, the Shinoa squad runs through the urban chaos, surrounded by evacuation announcements that everyone is clearly ignoring. Yoichi, with his eagle eyes and bird brain, notices that the rank-and-file soldiers are using budget bin enchanted gear, basically the Wish.com version of the protagonist's cursed gear. Gurren is perched on a rooftop, striking a leading man pose while overlooking the battlefield. He locks eyes with Farid from a distance, maintaining that thick homoerotic tension that fuels this entire anime. When a hooded vampire tries to attack waifu tier Sayuri, Mito steps in and turns the enemy into dust with a single punch, proving that a little feminine violence is the ultimate solution for workplace harassment. On the other side, Farad continues his favorite hobby, psychologically torturing Mika, reminding the blondie that he needs to drink human blood if he doesn't want to turn into a mindless demon. This triggers a traumatic flashback from 4 years earlier, in which the Gothic queen tries to force Mika to drink her blood. The boy refuses, choosing death over losing his humanity, but she doesn't care. She keeps insisting that he accept it. Mika tries to resist, but the thirst wins out, and he ends up downing it with the enthusiasm of a newborn, sealing his fate as the queen's personal lapdog. Back in the present, Mika slams a vial of blood like it's a shot of tequila and heads out to find his princess, Yu. In the transport truck, Shinoa decides it's time for some advanced PE and introduces the team to doping pills. The logic is simple. Take 1, you're a powerhouse. Take 2, you're in the ER. Take 3, and you're the face on a Gone Too Soon memorial t-shirt. Before they can debate the ethics of demonic steroid use, the universe decides the dialogue was getting boring, and the truck is blown sky high by missiles, flipping more times than a failed reality star's career. They crawl out of the wreckage, and Yu, in a rare moment of moronic altruism, decides to save a literal Who NPC driver named Nagai. This causes the ground to give way, separating the main couple from the rest of the extras. Underground, Yu carries the soldier's dead weight, while Shinoa leads the way. On the surface, Mika spots the explosion, and finally comes face to face with Gurren, who draws his sword, ready to turn this family reunion into a bloodbath. Gurren fails miserably at killing Mika, grumbling like a curmudgeon stuck in a DMV line. Enter Farad, the silver-haired drama queen, who drops in to admire the carnage. He asks if the vampires are ready for chow time, clearly enjoying everyone else's misery a little too much. Gurren ignores the verbal abuse and invokes Mahiru's power, swearing this will be the bloodsucker's last supper. To break the frantic pace with a dose of depression, we cut to a flashback. Underground, Yu and Mika are playing house by candlelight. Mika is already plotting their escape like he's playing prison architect on hardcore mode, asking Yu if he'd like to live in a world where they aren't just walking blood bags. Yu, never the sharpest tool in the shed, finds it all too confusing and calls the blonde a weirdo, having no clue how badly this plan would blow up in their faces. Back to the miserable rainy present. Yu and Shinoa drop off an NPC driver at a field hospital. Upon hearing that the rest of the squad is getting hammered at the park, Yu decides military orders are merely optional suggestions and charges in to save his friends, proving that the power of friendship and a lack of brain cells go hand in hand. Shinoa tries to use logic but gives up and follows the idiot. At the park, Kimizuki, Mitsuba, and Yoichi are surrounded, complaining about the lack of their stupid protagonist to use as bait. Speak of the devil, Yu appears, carving through fodder vampires. The group reconciles in the middle of a pile of bodies. Kimizuki gripes that there's no cure for Yu's stupidity, just as the sun magically breaks through the clouds for a peak cliché moment. On the front lines, Gurren and Mika trade sword swings and personal insults. Gurren tries to slap an explosive talisman on Mika's forehead, thinking that'll stop a noble. A building collapses in the blast, but Mika emerges unscathed, mocking the outdated sorcery.
Explode now, Fudomio-o spell.
Farad watches from the sidelines like he's at a taping of a trashy reality TV show. When Gurren tries a dirty move with the help of his support harem, Farad intervenes, pimp slaps the lieutenant colonel, and sends him flying. Gurren realizes things have gone south and pulls out his demonic steroid pills, contemplating a double overdose. Sayuri and Mito beg him not to kill himself, but Mika, fed up with the melodrama and human bureaucracy, strikes before Gurren can swallow the pill. The blonde disarms the human leader and runs him through the chest, turning the heartthrob into a Gurren kebab. Yu sees his toxic foster dad getting skewered and goes into a blind rage. He lunges, screaming, and drives his thick black blade straight into the vampire's chest. The problem is, as the blade goes deep and the blood splatters, Yu's brain finally processes the visual. He realizes he just impaled his childhood best friend in a disastrous reunion, creating the most awkward and bloody cliffhanger possible to end the episode.
You damn vampire! You get away from him right now!
Yu stares at his own sword driven through Mika's chest, processing the information with the speed of a 90s dial-up connection, while Mika whispers his name with all the drama of a Mexican soap opera. Gurren, tired of carrying the whole team on his back, tries to slap a cursed talisman on the blade. Realizing Yu has hit a blue screen of death, Gurren decides that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, and swings to slice the blonde vampire. Gurren, the toxic father of the year, immediately punches Yu in the face for failing to finish the job, spitting blood like he's in the advanced stages of tuberculosis. The Shinoa squad watches their protagonist with the silent judgment reserved for total dead weight, and Yu finally realizes that the blonde kid really was Mika. Farid, the immortal silver-haired drama queen, watches the whole thing from the front row. He comments on how touching the scene is and offers to turn Yu into a vampire just to watch the world burn. This triggers Mika's Yandere mode, and he threatens the noble. Farid says he'll hold off the humans while Mika makes a run for it with his princess. When the vampire creep tries to touch Yu's shoulder, Mika severs Farid's arm in a fit of jealousy, proving that nobody touches his man. That's when Crowley arrives with his 2 gothic waifus, and the squad recognizes the guy they hit with a stolen car a few episodes back. Farid gives the order to turn everyone into livestock, and Gurren orders a retreat to the second defense line. But Farid, being the ultimate troll, blocks the path and starts using Gurren as a human punching bag, tossing the lieutenant against poles and walls while dodging Yu's attacks by basically moonwalking. While his friends are being mauled by generic vampires and Yoichi has a PTSD breakdown seeing his sister's killer, Mika decides it's time for the honeymoon. He scoops Yu up in a bridal carry and bolts, ignoring the black-haired boy's screams about saving his friends. Mika tries to explain that the humans are just using Yu for experiments and that they should drop everything to live together in an isolated cottage, but Yu's smooth brain fails to compute the information. Yu breaks free only to see a horror show. Crowley is beating Shinoa, Chess is biting Mitsuba's neck, Horn is draining Kimizu ki, and some random vampire is grabbing a snack off Yoichi's shoulder. The visual trauma is too much for Yu's single remaining brain cell, which decides to switch off logic and toggle berserk mode. His eye bleeds. A disgusting tar-like wing sprouts from his back, and he turns into a mass of pure hatred, destroying gas stations and buildings with all the grace of a bull in a china shop. Gurren laughs, revealing that this uncontrollable monster was his plan all along. The transformed Yu, now completely high on demonic power, tries to kill Shinoa herself, but Mika, refusing to let anyone else be penetrated by Yu, throws himself in front of the blade. Yu stabs Mika for the 2nd time this episode, a new personal record, and tries to drive the sword deeper until Shinoa hugs the monster, using the power of a female touch to calm the beast. The tar recedes, and Yu passes out. Before the vampires can finish the job, Shinya Hiragi appears camping with a rifle on a distant building and snipes them with white energy tigers, saving the day. Kureto Hiragi arrives with an entire army to take the credit, declaring he'll capture the nobles and show everyone who's boss, ending the episode with the typical arrogance of someone who showed up late to the party. Shinoa descends the stairs of an underground complex with the air of someone about to uncover that the government is hiding either aliens or tax evasion. She uses her status as a Hiragi family Nippo baby to intimidate 2 guards with a fancy pocket watch, forcing her way into a lab that reeks of the faint scent of war crimes. Inside, scientists are playing Dr. Frankenstein with captured vampires, proving that humanity wastes no time in being horrible. She finds Gurren acting the part of the busy boss in an office with a panoramic view of the atrocities. When the girl questions why Yu turned into a giant salt shaker of mass destruction in the last battle, Gurren dodges the question and admits, with the subtlety of a brick, that he turned our protagonist into a drugged-up lab rat. To change the subject, he asks if Shinoa has a crush on Yu, making the girl blush harder than a tomato on clearance and kicking her out of the room before she can ask any useful questions. Meanwhile, we get a quick flashback where Farid continues to be the creepy uncle nobody invited to the barbecue. Back in the present, Mika wakes up naked, inside a giant Tupperware full of blue gastric juice, completing his post-trauma spa treatment. His vampire colleagues try to make small talk about the monster that appeared in battle, but Mika toggles emo goth mode and ignores their existence, declaring he's just an ugly monster, which is a blatant lie considering the animation budget spent on his face. On the other side of the wall, Yu finally wakes up from a 7-day coma in the hospital. Yoichi throws himself at him with the grace of a runaway tractor, crying tears of joy. Shino-a enters the room to explain that congrats, you're not dead, but the government is corrupt and the war goes on. When Yu asks about Mika, she confirms the blondie is alive and the protagonist starts sobbing, proving his only functional neuron is dedicated exclusively to his unofficial vampire boyfriend. The scene shifts when Yu decides to inspect Shino-a's neck, getting way too close to see the vampire bite. Mitsuba walks in at that exact moment, sees the scene, and immediately spirals into total panic, knocking over chairs and screaming. Kimizuki arrives shortly after to restore order to the henhouse, and the group decides to take a break from the killing, solidifying the power of generic shonen friendship. While several random characters are shown striking dramatic and useless poses in various locations, Yu and Mika look at the moon at the same time from different places, in a cheesy display of romantic telepathy, promising to save each other against everyone's will. The episode ends with Farad on a rooftop handing a box of dirty secrets to a mysterious partner, laughing at everyone's misfortune, and confirming that, in this anime, trusting adults is the fastest way to end up dead or a science experiment. The unresolved tension continues as Shino-a tries to squeeze information out of Gurren in the middle of the courtyard, accusing him of keeping secrets about her dead sister, Mahiru. Gurren, acting like a divorced dad ignoring his daughter on his weekend, points his sword at her throat and explains that his psychotic ex-girlfriend lives inside the blade, but he's not possessed, just emotionally unavailable. He walks away, leaving Shino-a talking to herself, a skill she has mastered perfectly. Later, Shino-a finds Yu in the library, which is shocking, considering nobody knew the protagonist could read. He's researching how to turn vampires back into humans, but when he gets tired and almost faints, Shino-a wakes him up and accuses him of reading adult magazines, implying he was looking for pictures of big, thick swords. Yu tries to deny it, but Shino-a throws a reality check in his face. Turning Mika back is biologically improbable. Even so, Yu decides he will dedicate his life to bringing his blonde boyfriend back, and the girl realizes that growing up means accepting your crush is gay. Leaving there, Yu bumps into Gurren again, who drops an ultra-possessive speech saying he owns Yu, warning him not to wag his tail for the Hiragi family. In the elevator, Yu finds Mitsuba crying. She reveals she's been promoted, but admits she's just a useless nepo baby who only rose in rank because of her family name. Yu, being the motivational simp he is, strokes her ego until the door opens to corporate hell. Yu enters a dark room for his performance review, where a random vampire is let loose. Yu kills the creature in a second, and the lights turn on to reveal the panel of examiners. Kureto Hiragi, the man with the most arrogant eyebrows in the army, and Shinya. Kureto decides to test the boy by attacking without warning, and when Yu tries to fight back, Shinya summons his white tiger rifle and points the bayonet at the protagonist's face, proving that bringing a sword to a gunfight is just stupid. To ensure the job interview is sufficiently traumatic, Kureto reveals a window where the duo are being tortured. He demands the absolute truth, revealing that Yu is a lab rat from the Hyakuya sect, and that Gurren only saved him to use his body as a weapon of mass destruction. Yu, in a surge of generic heroism, screams that he accepts being used as long as they let his friends go. Outside, Yu runs to Gurren and demands the truth. The lieutenant colonel admits point blank that Yu is just a valuable tool in his inventory. Instead of being offended, Yu accepts the toxicity of the relationship as long as Gurren helps save Mika. Gurren promises to teach him how to use his sword properly, since up until now, he's just been swinging the thing around like a maniac. Meanwhile, underground, Mika is suffering from growing pains and blood withdrawal. Farad shows up and suggests that Mika stop aging now that he's at a good age. He attacks a random guy, offering the blood to Mika, who refuses the free meal. Farad, bored with the blonde's morality, invites him to a vampire council meeting, because nothing cures bloodlust like political bureaucracy. The Suicide Squad decides to train their affinity with their cursed gear in an abandoned building in Shibuya in the middle of the night, because apparently sleep is for the weak and for those without demons in their heads. Yu asks Ashiramaru to possess him, but tells the demon to go slow. He only wants just the tip of the demonic power for now. While the protagonist rolls his eyes and faints in spiritual ecstasy, Yoichi perches on a pole like a sniper pigeon, killing horsemen of the apocalypse with his neon green bow and proving that talking to yourself while sleeping is the secret to success.
Protect everyone.
While Yu is drooling on the floor, Kimizuki pins Shino-a against a metaphorical wall, demanding to know why he and Yoichi were tortured by the Hiragis. Shino-a admits she manipulates everyone, but promises to tell the truth as soon as Sleeping Beauty wakes up. Inside Yu's messed up mind, he relives his childhood trauma where his parents scream that he's a demon child and try to stab him, which explains a lot about his personality. Ashuramaru tries to break his spirit by showing his dead orphanage family, but Yu pulls the Power of Friendship trap card, holds an imaginary Mika's hand, and convinces the demon that they should be lonely buddies. The demon is so confused by this shonen speech that he accepts the proposal of a platonic marriage. Meanwhile, underground, there's a vampire HOA meeting via Zoom. Farid, the ultimate troll, shows the video of Yu turning into a black ink monster, proving the humans have weaponized the Seraph. Cruel tries to lie, saying she killed everyone years ago, but a garden gnome named Lest Carr, who looks like he escaped from a chocolate factory, challenges her authority and says he'd rule Japan way better. After the meeting, Cruel slashes the floor in rage, but Farid reminds her they are trapped in a toxic relationship of mutual blackmail, since both hold secrets that could lead to their execution.
What do you think you're doing?
Back at the night training, it's Kimizuki's turn to be mentally tortured. His demon, Kiseki-o, throws him into a sadomasochistic illusion where his sick sister begs to be murdered so he can be free. But Kimizuki remembers that Yu is too stupid to give up on family, so instead of killing the imaginary sister, he stabs himself in the gut, proving that idiocy is contagious in this squad. Kimizuki wakes up powered up and decides to have a power scaling contest with Yu. The protagonist summons explosive flying swords, while Kimizuki summons a floating coffin that starts a countdown. Basically, a gothic microwave of death. Shino-a watches the destruction and realizes these boys are leveling up way too fast, like a rich kid using his mom's credit card on a gacha game. She checks the files and sees Gurren deleted their search history, confirming they are illegal experiments pumped with demonic steroids and that things are about to hit the fan. A random boy in the vampire catacombs decides that the most efficient way to transmit highly important encrypted data in the 21st century is to tie a piece of paper to a pigeon's leg and hope the bird doesn't become a cat's lunch. Surprisingly, the pigeon crosses the apocalypse and delivers the message to the human support waifu, who passes it to the psychopathic boss, Kureto Hiragi. Meanwhile, Yu wakes up fighting his spiky hair, proving that not even the end of the world justifies a bad hair day. In the kitchen, the girls fight with burning frying pans until Kimizuki, the true housewife of this anime, takes over the stove and makes perfect omelets, humiliating the femininity of the entire cast. During breakfast, Shino-a decides to ruin the mood by revealing that maybe, just maybe, Lieutenant Gurren is using them as lab rats and weapons of mass destruction. Yu, with the intellectual depth of a saucer, hears that he almost killed Shino-a in berserk mode but decides to ignore basic logic and declares Gurren family, diving headfirst into Stockholm Syndrome. Gurren meets Kurito on the roof, where the maniac keeps 3 vampires chained up. Kurito asks if Gurren is raising a private army of black demons to stage a coup, but Gurren deflects with his usual arrogance. To prove he's the alpha of the pack, Kurito has snipers blow the heads off the captive vampires behind Gurren, making a mess of the floor just for the sake of drama. The boss's plan is simple: exterminate 10 vampire nobles in Nagoya before they invade Tokyo in a month. On the school rooftop, Shino-a finds Yu looking at the horizon and immediately assumes he's trying to spot panties from a distance. Yu reaffirms his commitment to being a generic shonen protagonist who forgives everything in the name of friendship, deciding to trust Gurren to save Mika, even though every sign points to that being a terrible idea. Speaking of the depressed blonde, Mika invades Cruel's throne room shaking from withdrawal. The lowly queen offers her neck, and Mika attacks her jugular with the subtlety of an industrial vacuum cleaner. When he finishes and realizes the mess he's dismayed. He tries to act tough, but Cruel puts him in his place, treating the boy like the glorified pet he is. She whispers in his ear that the real plan involves him betraying everyone, humans and vampires alike, to save you, because apparently the fate of the world revolves around the bromance between these two. Shinoa informs Gurren that the team accepts being cannon fodder in Nagoya, while the vampires prep planes for war. The episode ends with Kureto and his assistant frying Kamizuki's sister in an experimental electric chair, cranking up the voltage until black smoke comes out, proving that humanity maybe deserves to go extinct after all. The Shinoa squad is on a post-apocalyptic school field trip inside a military jeep. Shinoa suggests hitting up some hot springs to see everyone naked, while Mitsuba, the official killjoy, reminds them they're actually headed to a slaughterhouse in Nagoya. The conversation is cut short when a horseman of the apocalypse decides that car insurance doesn't cover acts of God and attacks the group. Mitsuba pulls out her giant axe to compensate for something and cleaves the beast in half, while Yoichi and Yu use their demons to clear the road with the subtlety of a jackhammer. But the real fun begins when Shinoa, proving to be the best leader ever, orders an evasive maneuver that ejects the protagonist from the vehicle like non-recyclable trash. While Yu faceplants onto the asphalt, the car drives off with his friends laughing and waving, making it crystal clear that nobody actually likes him. At the rendezvous point, Gurren is busy pretending to be a serious military man, but his team is only interested in being horny. Goshi is caught analyzing bikini literature, and Sayuri, with her dignity in the negatives, offers to wear a bikini if the colonel wants, proving her thirst is greater than the literal end of the world. Shinya drifts onto the scene in a stolen red sports car, because apparently, the apocalypse is no excuse for lacking style or wasting gas. The Shinoa squad finally arrives late. Shinoa's attempt at Metal Gear Solid level stealth fails miserably when Gurren spots her immediately. Yu, with his room temperature IQ, tries to take the fall by claiming he was busy fighting monsters, but Gurren decides the punishment will come later. The colonel's motivational speech is basically, "You're all going to die, but try to die winning." For the punishment, Yu heads to the basement to find Gurren and his gang. Goshi creates a smoke illusion where Yu appears tied up and being roasted alive, a scenario likely pulled from the deepest, darkest corners of a fanfic writer's mind. Shinoa dispels the illusion, and Gurren begins an educational beatdown, claiming Shinoa needs to learn the fear of loss since she's been treating the war like a game. The training battle begins, and it's about as balanced as an ant versus an anteater. Shinya uses his rifle to fire spirit tigers that hunt their targets, while Gurren humiliates Yu and Kimizuki in hand-to-hand combat. Things get ugly when Gurren slaps an explosive tag on Yu's forehead. Instead of backing off, our suicidal genius decides to hug Gurren, so they blow up together, proving his strategy is based purely on collateral damage. Gurren triggers the trap, wipes the floor with everyone, and declares victory, making it clear that the power of friendship can't tank military experience. Narumi, a background character with a permanent scowl, complains about being a babysitter, but Gurren forces the squad partnership anyway. Meanwhile, in some ruined wasteland, Mika watches children being stockpiled like cattle for noble vampires. The blondie is shaking from withdrawal, salivating more than Pavlov's dog at the sight of human necks. He almost attacks a little girl but holds back through pure spite, choosing to chug Cruel Tape's bottled blood instead. He continues his strict diet of goth loli juice to avoid turning into a full-blown monster. Gurren delivers a generic motivational speech, worthy of a 3rd Division soccer coach, begging his army of extras not to die in the first 5 minutes. In Nagoya, the Shinoa squad joins forces with the Narumi squad, and the vibe is about as friendly as a homeowners association meeting. Narumi's team looks at Yu's gang like they're about to carry noobs in a ranked match, doubting they're good for anything other than vampire bait. Yu, of course, fires back with the classic shonen protagonist trope about protecting his friends, probably because memorizing enemy names takes up too much space in that smooth brain of his. Perched atop a tower, Shinya and Yoichi are playing professional campers, eyeing their target, Lukal Vesker, a noble who drinks blood from a crystal goblet because etiquette is everything. Lukal is busy discussing politics with his servant Esther, but apparently tires of the conversation and decides to use his own employee as a human shield, tossing the poor guy directly into the sniper's line of fire. Since gratitude isn't his strong suit, Lukal unleashes a red energy wave that slices the tower in half, forcing Shinya and Yoichi to surf the debris while returning fire. On the ground, the brawl begins, and Lucal proves that being high level in an RPG makes a difference. He toys with Yu, and in a moment of pure disrespect, grabs Shinoa's scythe and uses the short girl as a human club to block Narumi's attack. It's literally beating one son of a bitch with another son of a bitch.
Out of the way! No!
Mitsuba summons her demon to save the day, and the rest of the gang manages to pin the vampire's arm with magical chains. Lucal, however, would rather lose a limb than his dignity and chops his own arm off to escape, taking the phrase, lending a hand, way too literally. Kimizuki, showing enviable tactical maturity, starts kicking and poking the vampire's severed arm on the ground, taunting him just to see him snap. The bullying works. The vampire goes berserk and charges, only to take a skill combo to the face and drop to his knees. Before poor Yayoi can land the finishing blow and claim the kill XP, Lucal decides being killed by human livestock is too cringe. He snatches her sword and drives the blade into his own chest, pulling the biggest rage quit of the season just to deny them the satisfaction of victory. Meanwhile, Gurren just soloed another noble off-screen, but the celebration is short-lived. A soldier arrives bleeding more than a character in a Tarantino movie to report that the mission was a total failure and the rest of the army has been taken hostage. Before the guy kicks the bucket, Goshi uses an illusion so he can go to heaven seeing pretty things. Gurren, with the tactical intelligence of a doorknob, decides the best strategy is to walk straight into an obvious trap. Their destination? Crowley Usford, who is chilling and reading a book while using crucified humans as garden decor, waiting for the idiots to arrive. Chess Bell, who clearly skipped home economics, gets overexcited during snack time and drains a hostage so hard he turns into a raisin, ruining the blood supply. Crowley, intrigued by the quality of the loot, picks up the dead man's sword and in an act of pure camaraderie, tests the blade by hurling his own ally into a wall. He notices the humans received a massive damage buff and suspects there's a snitch leaking the vampire server's patch notes to humanity. Meanwhile, the protagonist squad is waiting for reinforcements, but all they get is Aihara and a handful of survivors. Gurren arrives shortly after, pretending he didn't just kill a noble off-screen to save the animation budget, and decides to ignore the massive casualties. His brilliant plan is to march straight to City Hall and fall into the obvious trap, leaving Aihara behind to act as a voicemail service for the other teams. Aihara's piece lasts exactly 3 seconds before vampire helicopters show up. She goes full Rambo and downs a military aircraft with a magical arrow because physics is optional here. But Lacus, Renee, and our favorite depressed blondie, Mikhaila, drop from the sky. Realizing the matchmaking is unfair, Aihara orders her squad to swallow poison pills, preferring mass suicide over becoming a vampire Capri Sun. But Mika, who has zero respect for personal space, shoves his fingers into Aihara's mouth and yanks the pill out, not out of heroism, but because he needs to gossip. He corners the girl and asks about the protagonist with that obsessive stalker look of someone who collects hair samples. Aihara realizes this vampire has a fetish for the idiot protagonist and decides to use it. In a performance worthy of a Mexican soap opera, she pretends to be captured and screams a blatant lie to the other vampires, sending Lacus and Renee on a wild goose chase for an imaginary noble in a botanical garden in the middle of nowhere. To sell the lie, Aihara whispers to Mika that Yu is at City Hall and begs to be killed, since an extra who knows too much has the lifespan of a housefly. She grazes Mika with a shot just for appearances, and he, with the grace of a tractor, shreds the girl with an energy wave. Aihara dies thanking him, happy to finally escape this chaotic script. Mika ditches his partners with the lie and heads to City Hall with a psychotic little smile, ready to reunite with his crush. Outside City Hall, Gurren observes the hostages hanging from crosses like low-budget Halloween decorations and gathers his suicide squad. The plan is genius. Save whoever you can, and if a vampire hits too hard, abandon the mission and run home crying. Narumi, being the only one with functional brain cells in this anime, suggests sacrificing the hostages to save time. This causes you to have a moralistic temper tantrum typical of a shonen protagonist who thinks the power of friendship can tank anything. Shinya decides to test his luck and has Yoichi use his glowing green bird to spy. The kid launches the energy chicken straight at a 5th floor window, but Crowley, proving he's using invincibility cheat codes, catches the magical projectile with his bare hand like it's a crumpled piece of paper. The big vampire doesn't even break a sweat, merely commenting that it was a bit strange, while the humans below realize this boss's health bar is infinite.
Fly true for me, Geckoweed.
With the clock ticking and only 5 minutes to perform a miracle, Gurren gives the green light. Goshi activates his illusion mojo, creating 200 fake soldiers and making the idiot vampires fight the air while the team invades. Narumi starts the rescue, but Crowley sees Gurren approaching and decides to play dollhouse. The noble shrugs off explosions with a yawn and tosses Gurren onto Shinya with the delicacy of a runaway truck, proving the matchmaking for this match is completely broken. Shinoa, realizing the shit is hitting the fan in record time, tries to coordinate the rescue while Gurren and Shinya try to escape by blasting holes in the wall. But Crowley bursts through the concrete like the Kool-Aid Man and intercepts the dynamic duo. He plunges his sword into Gurren's shoulder, not to kill him, but because he has a fetish for interrogating pretty commanders. Gurren, realizing he's become the damsel in distress, yells at Shinya to get out and take command before they both turn into cold cuts. But before Shinya can process the abandonment trauma, Yu ignores all retreat orders and explodes through the floor from below, ruining the intimate moment between the noble vampire and his new human toy. But Crowley uses the human captain as a meat shield, proving that ethics aren't a vampire stat. The protagonist goes into Wish.com Gilgamesh mode, summoning dozens of flying swords. But Crowley's groupies, Chess and Horn, show up to block everything and remind us that secondary characters only exist to take hits. Shinoa manages to block a fatal attack with her scythe, but the impact sends her and Yu flying, proving the level gap between them and a noble is wider than Kanye West's ego. The squad decides to retreat while Gurren is hurled against a wall to stop him from talking trash. Crowley decides not to kill the kids because he thinks Farad might want to play with Yu later, which sounds wrong on so many levels it's best not to comment. Shinya takes command and drags Yu away, who is kicking and screaming about the power of friendship. As they flee, Goshi activates the studio's cheat codes and turns the hallway into a game of The Floor is Lava, creating an illusion of molten magma. Crowley examines the graphical rendering quality and wonders who gave the humans such a high-end graphics card, but he soon tires of the game. With a single lazy swing of his sword, he releases a purple energy that deletes the illusion, the scenery, and the rescue team's hopes, leaving Gurren tied up to be gifted to Farad later.
Super impressive, Lord Crowley.
Meanwhile, at Psychopath HQ, Kurito is preparing a mysterious box that promises to save humanity. Seishiro shows up trying to pull rank using Daddy's name, but Aoi cuts down his guards before they can even finish a sentence. Kurito laughs in his brother's face, sends him to the corner of shame, and goes back to focusing on his plan for world domination. Back to the teen drama. Yu has an emotional flashback to when he was a kid, and Gurren pretended to care about him by reading bedtime stories. Motivated by this memory of fatherly warmth, Yu decides that biology is merely a suggestion. Ignoring every overdose warning on the label, he swallows 2 more demon supplement pills. Considering 3 would kill a normal person and he'd already taken some, his body reels from the side effects as his heart decides to take a permanent vacation.
No!
Don't do it!
Outside, Mika arrives via aerial Uber in a helicopter. When the vampires with him suggest going to see Crowley, Mika decides he prefers a solo career and slices them all in the blink of an eye, asking where the hell Yu went. While Mika looks for his princess, the demon squad watches Yu's body sprawled on the ground without a pulse, proving that drugs are, in fact, bad for your health. On the other side of town, Kurito smirks as his secret weapon is loaded, ready to sacrifice whoever it takes to keep his ego inflated. In the astral plane of stupidity, Yu discovers that taking 3 times the lethal dose of demonic Viagra has side effects, like his heart exploding like a cheap party balloon. Ashuramaru, acting as Hell's most overworked IT support, explains that Yu's body has turned into mush. However, our protagonist has the attention span of a brick and gets hypnotized by a golden trumpet on the floor. Ignoring all warnings that angels are worse than demons and loan sharks combined, Yu tries to grab the instrument to start his jazz career, forcing Ashuramaru to pierce his chest to grant him power before he does something even stupider. Back in the real world, Yu wakes up high on power and rushes back to save his princess, Gurren. Meanwhile, Crowley and his vampire toys continue to humiliate Gurren until Yu crashes through the window. The problem is Yu is so power drunk, he can barely focus, and Crowley, being the ultimate Chad he is, treats the attack like a child playing with a stick. He makes sure to remind Yu that he's nothing but livestock, which might explain why Yu decides to sprout a black horn and fangs, activating his partial demon furry mode. Crowley gets visibly excited by the transformation, licking his lips in a way that would make anyone call the police, ready to play with his new hybrid toy. But before the weird party continues, Kimizuki's demon decides that the best mode of transport is a floating coffin with a countdown timer. Kimizuki grabs the possessed Yu, tosses him inside the gourmet black box, and the group escapes through a hole in the floor, leaving a disappointed Crowley behind. Outside, the situation is more chaotic than a Black Friday sale. Mika, the ultimate drama queen, is standing on top of a car watching the snow, deciding it's time to get his man, ignoring the entire army of humans and vampire helicopters closing in. Mika goes full berserk mode, charging alone against hundreds of Moon Demon Company soldiers. Goshi tries to use his children's party magician illusions to melt the blonde vampire's legs, but Mika tanks the psychological damage through pure spite and keeps moving. He gets sliced, stabbed, and battered from all sides, but like a true simp, he ignores the physical pain because the pain of not having Yu is greater. He tears through the human defenses like wet paper, knocking Mitsuba aside and ignoring Shinawa's pleas, all just to reach the pink-haired guy and headbutt him into oblivion. Finally holding his beloved Yu, Mika smiles like a lovesick idiot, but Yoichi and Shinya decide to ruin the romantic moment by sticking a bayonet in his back. That's when Shinoa realizes that if Mika dies, Yu will be unbearable to deal with later, so she makes the executive decision to betray humanity and tells Mika to run. Her squad activates plot armor protection mode, creating a barrier to let the vampire escape.
What? Why did you stop him?
Yes. You have to take him and run.
While the extras from Narumi's team are left confused and start getting slaughtered by the vampire reinforcements descending from the sky. As NPCs like Yayoi are brutally deleted from existence to show how serious things are, Mika walks through the snow bleeding out, carrying Yu on his back, and leaving a blood trail that the sanitation department is going to hate cleaning up tomorrow. Shinya realizes his 100-man army has been reduced to a shrinking WhatsApp group and orders a strategic withdrawal, also known as hauling ass. While Shinoa tries to organize the escape, Narumi is in a state of shock after discovering his friends were just NPCs scripted to die for the protagonist's character development. Shinya, having no patience for other people's drama, applies standard anime shock therapy by slapping him across the face, dragging the rest of the squad toward the airport before they become fertilizer. Far away, Mika drags Yu's useless body through the snow, bleeding more than a broken faucet. He's so desperate he even considers attacking a random on the street, but his emo goth pride kicks in. He'd rather die of thirst than be called a monster by a brat. He stashes Yu inside an abandoned convenience store and tries to suffer alone in the corner, but our protagonist wakes up with the energy of someone who just downed 5 expired energy drinks. Ashura Maru warns that Yu's brain has turned to mush, but he ignores it and focuses on the blonde vampire having a withdrawal crisis in the snack aisle. Mika, losing the fight against his instincts, pins Yu to the ground in a position that would make Fujoshi's faint, screaming for blood.
Mika! Come on! I need to drink some blood!
Yu, with the self-preservation of an amoeba, basically baring his neck and offers a drink on the house. But Mika refuses, explaining that drinking blood directly from the source would cancel his humanity-free trial and turn him into a full immortal vampire. Yu, who doesn't care about technical details or informed consent, decides to force the issue. He cuts his own arm, smears the vital liquid on Mika's face, and tells him if he dies, he's going to cry a lot. Faced with this cheap emotional blackmail and the smell of dinner, Mika finally stops stalling. He sinks his fangs into Yu's neck, drinking with a thirst that's been repressed for years. Instead of screaming in pain, Yu hugs the vampire and strokes his hair like a pet, creating a moment of disturbing intimacy behind a shelf of canned goods. When Mika finishes swallowing every last drop, his eyes turn from blue to red, officially starting his Vampirism Premium subscription. Now with a full stomach, Mika tries to convince Yu to run away to the countryside and live a pastoral romance far from the war, explaining that humans are trash and that the Hyakuya orphanage was actually a lab for Seraph of the End lab rats. Basically, the apocalypse was humanity's fault for trying to play God. Yu hears all this, sees two birds flying, and decides the metaphor for freedom is nice, but he'd rather go back to hell to save Shino-a and the other idiots. Mika, realizing he's too much of a simp to say no to Yu, agrees to drive the stolen jeep to rescue his boyfriend's human friends. Meanwhile, at the airport, the squad discovers there are no helicopters, no cars, and probably no hope. To top off this shit show, Kurito Hiragi appears elsewhere, showing off his new weapon of mass destruction. Kimizuki's sister, Mirai, hooked up to tubes and suffering immensely while a demonic shadow emerges from her, proving the Hiragi family doesn't know how to play anything that isn't a war crime. The survivor squad arrives at Nagoya Airport expecting 5-star rescue service, only to find the Imperial Army is about as reliable as a dad going out for a pack of smokes. Instead of helicopters and hot cocoa, they find a letter basically saying, "Stay there and die quietly." Rika, an extra with an expired shelf life, decides to blame the purple midget Shinowa for their friends' deaths. She draws her sword, ready for a hate crime, but Narumi intervenes, deciding the real enemy is the company HR that abandoned them. Meanwhile, across the street, Gurren is being used as a punching bag by a noble vampire while Crowley and Farid watch and eat popcorn. Farid, that venomous snake in high heels, reveals that Gurren has a split personality. One wants to save his friends, and the other is possessed by his toxic dead ex-girlfriend, Mahiru. Basically, Gurren's body is a cheap motel for demons. Tired of taking a beating, Gurren lets his waifu take the wheel, activates God mode, and slices the noble into pieces. He then has a chat with the lowly queen, convinces her to bring the entire vampire army to the airport, and turns the place into the biggest apocalyptic rave ever. Back at the airport, the cavalry finally arrives, led by Kurito and Mitsuba's traitor sister. Kurito steps off the plane with the arrogance of someone who bought the game server and announces that total victory is guaranteed. He brings a giant container that Shinya, using the family's only functional neuron, realizes does not contain medical supplies. Kurito tells Shinya to shut up and activates his Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap card. The box opens, releasing a metal tentacle hentai that pierces everything in sight, but without the pleasure. Narumi tries to tank the damage, but the spikes turn his entire squad into instant human kebabs. Rika and the gang die faster than you do in bed, proving that characters whose names don't appear in the opening credits are just there for fertilizer. Kurito calmly explains that sacrificing his own team is justice, while he keeps shooting phallic chains in every direction. In the middle of this massacre, Yu and Mika arrive hand in hand to witness the horror show. Yu, with the intelligence of a door, asks what the hell is going on, while Kurito decides that killing vampires and humans at the same time is efficient multitasking. The sky darkens with vampire helicopters arriving for the bloody bacchanal, turning the airport into a deathly love triangle between betrayed humans, a psychopathic Kurito, and thirsty vampires. Yu sees a golden opportunity to mess things up and decides to cut a path with his sword. He slices random vampires with the enthusiasm of a kid at Disney World until he runs into Gurren. Completely ignoring the glowing red eyes and the "I'm going to kill you" aura, Yu runs into Daddy's arms with a stupid grin. Gurren returns the affection by drawing his sword and bringing the blade down on the protagonist's hollow head, ending the family reunion in the healthiest way possible for this series.
Hoping that you would be.
Mika, stepping into his role as the jealous wife, blocks the attack and blows Gurren away. Meanwhile, Kurito Hiragi, the man who compensates for his lack of empathy with the size of his forehead, decides the apocalypse is getting boring and gives the order to start the horror show. The mysterious box explodes, revealing Mirai, the telephone pole known as Kimizuki's sister, who has finally stopped being a sad plot device to become a trumpet of the apocalypse. She blows her cursed musical instrument and summons the demon of destruction, Abaddon, a creature that looks like it crawled out of a grotesque hentai nightmare. The demon starts spitting bubbles that turn into horsemen of the apocalypse, slaughtering extras with the efficiency of an industrial vacuum cleaner. Yu, with his amoeba brain, decides the only logical solution is tactical suicide. He ignores his inner demon's warnings, stabs himself in the chest, and blows the second trumpet, transforming into the King of Salt. Yes, his ultimate power is basically becoming a League of Legends player after losing a ranked match. Now with black wings and eyes like he's on heavy drugs, the King of Salt begins turning everything he touches into sodium pillars, proving that hypertension is humanity's true secret weapon. He annihilates Abaddon with a salty spear, turning the giant monster into a modern kitchen condiment sculpture. As chaos reigns, the lowly queen Cruel Tepes tries to intervene but is intercepted by the dynamic duo of Betrayal, Crowley and Farid. Crowley loses an arm but doesn't even care, while Farid takes the opportunity to bite the queen's neck and drain her until she faints, declaring that he's the boss now. On the other side, Shinoa's squad realizes that working for the Imperial Army is worse than an unpaid 6-day work week and decides to desert. Narumi, the sole survivor of his team, tells Gurren to kick rocks and helps the kids escape, while Shinya stays behind trying to understand why his best friend turned into a psychopath. 4 months later, because anime loves an unexplained time skip, we find out the humans won the battle and Kurito is now ruling the world. But who cares? Our group of misfits is living in a beach house with new looks, planning to rescue Kimizuki's sister and Gurren. Everything looks like a happy ending from a teen movie until Yu walks into the sea alone, with a glazed look in his eyes and mumbles something nonsensical about rain, proving that even with the world saved, his sanity remains an urban legend.